Hello. What is up, everybody? Sam,
Welcome. Here we go.
what's up, dude?
What is up, Matt? How you doing? Happy New Year. First time live this year, I think.
First live, first time hearing that sweet intro song.
Man, it gets me going. Friday
2026.
afternoon. Well, Friday afternoon for me. Happy Friday morning to you on the West Coast.
Friday morning for me. It's nice and, it's just a nice sunny morning out here.
Is
Nice
it?
and pleasant in
Have
Southern
you heard what
California.
I'm preparing for on the
I
East
have.
Coast?
That's why.
Ice apocalypse, end of
Snowmageddon.
days.
Is it cold right now?
It's cold. I mean, for Charlotte, it's cold.
Yeah.
But we're supposed to get like a third of an inch of ice.
Okay.
Which I don't know what the South is going to do with ice. I think we just shut down. We just stop everything altogether.
Wow. Yeah. That's wild. I
It's,
have been seeing
yeah,
what
we're
they're
bracing for it. We're ready to go. I got my heaters. We're ready to roll.
That's awesome. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Same in Texas.
Yeah, shut it
Shut it
down.
down.
Oh, I hope it's not like it was a couple years ago. Texas was brutal a couple years ago. Here we go,
That was
though.
brutal. Yeah. It's
It's going to be good.
yeah. Yeah, Texas, I think Texas shuts down when there's like the slightest bit of snow or ice is the word. So, but yeah, it's happening. Enough weather talk though, Just kicking it off, talking about the weather. We're just super excited to welcome everybody today. We've got people we're live streaming to LinkedIn. We've got some people on LinkedIn. We've got some people here in the Zoom. I don't know. We're live streaming all over the place. It's fun. We like to do it. We like to go live. We started doing this last year, just because Sam and I were having these conversations, and we were like, why don't we just go live and just do it and just invite people and see if anybody wants to come along and join us. So we're excited for you to join us today. And today we are very excited to be talking about a new topic, something that we are launching today. That we are next month, we're going to be at a conference called Founderology, and we're going to be introducing this concept. But today we're launching it for the first time to a group of people, and it's something that we're calling the 80% Club.
That's right.
So, welcome to the 80% Club.
Welcome to it. I'm going to pull up a deck here, share my
That's what I was looking
screen
for.
while we
Let's see
do
that
it.
screen.
You got this?
So, the 80% Club is all about scaling restaurants by promoting from within. This is about this target of having 80% of your leaders coming from within, because we have seen in our experience, from our time at Chipotle, leading training, learning development, internal communications, ops services, and also in our time as Training Simplified, partnering with restaurant, retail, hospitality brands. We've seen that this metric, it creates the strongest brands and really creates this growth trajectory. And ultimately, we believe that, next slide, we believe that you can't out hire a broken leadership pipeline. We believe that if your competitors are promoting faster than you, they're beating you. And we believe that there's nothing more rewarding than promoting someone that's earned it. And we believe that you can feel a difference between a culture that's been built versus borrowed. We believe these things because we've seen it, we've experienced firsthand. And so now we are helping brands achieve this aspirational goal of being a part of the 8% Club. And the truth is that I say aspirational because it's something that you aspire to, that you work towards, but it has to be more than intention. We also know that in order to achieve this, there has to be a system in place to get you there. And so today we're going to be talking about what we believe, what we've seen that makes the 80% Club this aspirational goal that really makes sense to scale brands, but also the systems that we need to put in place in order to achieve this aspirational goal.
That's exactly right. And when we talk about 80%, I think it's really important to say, well, what is 80%? Because we believe these things. And I think it's easy to say, I agree with a lot of those things. But when we say 80%, what are we talking about? And so we want to start there to really make sure we're aligned on, well, what are we talking about when we say 80%? And then over the course of this webinar, we're going to start breaking down, well, how do you do it? What are the building blocks? What are the brands doing that are promoting 80%? And how do I get there? So for anybody listening today, hopefully by the end of this, we're going to give you the answers and we'll leave you with a checklist or a tool to walk away with to say like, okay, which of these do I have in place? How far along am I? Learn some best practices from folks on here as well. But it all starts with this question, which is, we say the 80% Club. What is 80? What does 80 mean? And when we talk about it, it all starts with the rate of internal promotion. That's what we're talking about. Or we like acronyms here at Training Simplified. Matt and I rarely just say the thing. We got to make it fun and exciting in some way. And so rate of internal promotion, RIP, we call it the RIP, rate of internal promotion, the RIP. Hopefully you're not dying here. We're going RIP versus the dying RIP.
Let it rip.
Easy way to remember it. Like, what is the RIP? And so when we talk about rate of internal promotion, that's what we're talking about here. And this is really the difference that we're trying to get to, which is brands that promote people from within have a higher rate of internal promotion than brands that don't. And this tends to be some of what we start to see when we talk about, well, what is rate of internal promotion? And so as I go through this, be thinking about this, because we're going to prompt some folks on the call with a little bit of like, well, where are you at? So try to picture yourself and where your organization is here. Even if you don't know the number, you'll know directionally where you land on this scale. But we'll start all the way on the left here with below 20%. So if your rate of internal promotion is below 20%, that means you're hiring 80% of leaders from within, from the outside, or 80% of leaders from the outside. You're hiring them in versus promoting them. What this means, though, is usually if you're in this ballpark, we call these battlefield promotions. It's kind of like next person up promotions. Like, hey, we have an opening. I need you to be a manager right now because we need a manager on duty, and you're pulling somebody up. This kind of happens without a lot of effort. Most of the brands that we work with or that we've seen over the years, you can kind of stumble into the below 20% club just by existing. This kind of happens without trying at all. Obviously not where you want to be, because in this case, 80% of the leaders in your brand are coming from the outside. Our aspiration, and what we've seen the best do, is to start working your way to the right. And so we'll start talking about that now. When you start getting above 20, this is the next threshold, where what the thing that brands tend to feel that we hear a lot of is it's a lot of effort for every internal promotion. Like, you got to pour everything you have into the few people that are in your brand that can grow and can develop. So it feels like a lot of energy. And you're fighting this urge to hire people from the outside because it's taking so much effort to train from within. It's a lot easier to hire people from the outside, or it feels like it's going faster. And so you have this urge where you're like, I want to spend the time to promote people from within. It's going to be a whole lot faster if I just hire somebody, though, and get them in place. That's the tension you feel as you start to get from that 20 to 50. But the benefit starts to pay off if you sit through it. And so 50 is where brands start crossing the chasm. We call it the turning point. And this is the phrasing that most brands that we're working with are using, which is they realize they transition from a net importer of talent, where they're bringing talent into the organization, to where they're a net exporter of talent. They're pumping out more leaders than they're bringing in. And that flip is really important because you feel it inside of a brand. And so once you hit 50 and you cross over, you start to realize that, oh, we can do this. We've got an engine going, and now we can start creating leaders on our own. All of that leads to this spot where the biggest brands in the world rest somewhere in these next two buckets, the ones that are able to sustain. In the 50 to 80 is where you feel like internal promotions are easier, faster, more reliable. It's less effort than it took when you were at 20 to 50%. It's easier to train people from within. Usually there are systems in place here that we're going to talk about later. The risk here, though, is over promoting. When you start creating a culture of promoting from within, it starts to become a metric that we're measuring. And what we've seen a lot of brands fall in the trap of is they over promote people. They hit a number because they're supposed to be promoting from within. They lift people up or prop people up that maybe aren't the best leaders to hit the number. So good to focus on it, but here it's about quality and making sure that every leader we do promote from within maintains the quality standards that we have. We don't want to do it just to do it. We want the best leaders no matter where they come from. But that gets us to the 80% club, where at the 80% club, that means more than 80% of the leaders in your organization came from the inside. You trained them. And what this means is you're still hiring talent from the outside, but now you can be really selective. Now you can have a high bar for talent in the folks that come in versus saying like, hey, we got to just take anybody because we're growing and we need to take people. And that difference is the thing that matters more than anything. The risk here, there's a risk with every one of these. There's always a downside. The risk here that we've seen brands do, we've seen brands get to the upper 90s, upper 90%. And what happens then is you risk loss of innovation, right? You're only promoting people that have been trained inside your system. They only know your way. And so you're losing out on best practices or things that are happening in other brands. And so you risk out on the innovative side of things. You're going to become very insular in the way that you operate. A good problem to have for a lot of brands who are looking at that going, man, I wish I could get to 80%. But 80% is that hallmark. And we're going to talk about some brands and where they're at in their journey, and why this is so important. But now you can be super selective with who you promote and who you bring in from the outside, and you're not acting out of desperation. So that is the 80% club. Those are the flows. But as we go through it, hopefully in your mind you were picturing it, but I'm curious, where are you today? Of the folks that are on the webinar, would love to see it. And then Matt, I'll turn it over to you, but curious where folks are at today from what we're seeing.
All right, you should see a little poll there. Should see a little poll. We're just curious where you feel like your org is at. Let's see.
Oh yeah, we're seeing a few in the 20 to 50s. We get somebody in 50 to 80. That's awesome.
Oh, my bad. I don't know if everybody got the chance to do it, but I closed it. Share results. I don't know what everybody sees. I don't know what people see on your end.
Hey, who knows?
But yeah, people are kind of in that that 20 to 50 and 50 to 80. That's awesome. Sorry, I've never done a poll before.
We're figuring it out as we go here.
But the important thing is that people know. It's important to know this number. It's not something that often gets shared. It's not necessarily a KPI that brands are always talking about. But especially in our world, this is a huge metric to use and to know. So it's cool to see where people are at.
Absolutely. Well, let's break it down a little bit of why we think it's important. Because I feel okay, cool, there's numbers, but why is this so hard? Because not a lot of folks are in the 80% club. We'll show some brands, like I said, as we go through this, but this is hard to do. And the first reason why it's hard to do is because of the math here. And so I'm going to break this down, and hopefully this resonates with some of you of kind of where you're at or what you're thinking about when it comes here. But when we talk about promoting from within, here's a typical example of a restaurant. Depending on where you're at, you've got a GM. Almost every restaurant has a GM. You've got some number of managers. In this case, let's call it, you got two shift leaders. This would be a pretty tiny restaurant compared to some of the ones that we see, but it makes the math easy as we go through it. What we see, industry trends, industry norms, are that between 30 and 45% of managers turnover every year. I've got some sources down there, and we'll share all the sources afterwards so you can see some of this data. But for the average restaurant, if you've got 3 managers in there, one of them is going to be gone, which means you need to replace that manager every year just because of turnover, because of the way the industry works and the way the industry operates. Obviously, if your turnover is higher than that, you're going to lose multiple people. But the average restaurant is going to lose 1 out of 3 managers every single year. And so you've got that to work with. If you blow that up a little bit, you could say you have 5 units. That means you've got 15 managers here. You're going to lose 5 of them over the course of the year. And so this is where the problem starts to get a little bit bigger, and where you start to see recruiting functions go in. We've got a few folks on the call that I know are in the recruiting function. This is what funds that whole industry, which is we've always got to be hiring and growing people. In this case, you're going to lose 5 from within. The challenge starts to be for brands that are growing at the same time. So in this case, if you have 5 and you're growing to 6, you already had 5 people you need to replace, and now you need 3 more managers. So now you need 8 managers overall over the next year just to keep up with what's going on. And this is the math challenge that brands start to run into, which is this number gets really big depending on where this talent is coming from and how good your recruiting team is and all of that. And so this is the problem that starts to form. And so if you've got a rate of internal promotion or a RIP of 80%, that means of those managers that you just needed to replace, you only need to find 1 from the outside. So again, we can be very selective with who that 1 is. We can be very patient and make sure we get somebody great and really focus on it. If your RIP is somewhere down in the 20s, you need to replace all of them from the outside. One, that's a lot of work. But two, depending on the quality of folks that are coming in, your culture is starting to shift because that's a lot of folks that haven't been living in your culture. And that's a lot of folks that haven't been living and breathing your standards that are now leading your restaurant. And so the culture and the standards start to dilute a little bit if you don't manage this well. This is the problem that we had. So we stumbled on this years ago at Chipotle, and you can imagine the scale at Chipotle. So at Chipotle, when I was there, and Matt and I were there a decade ago, they had 2,000 stores. We had about 5 managers per store on average, and our turnover then was at 45%. So just based on that alone, we had to hire 4,500 managers every year just to backfill, just for turnover. We were also opening about 300 restaurants a year at the same time. And so again, 300 restaurants with 5 managers in each store, we needed another 1,500 managers just to open those stores. So in total, every year at Chipotle, we needed 6,000 managers just to keep up with growth and turnover. The good news for us was that we had created the system where 90% of managers were developed from within. So 5,400 of them we created from within using the system, which means our recruiting teams had to go out and still get 600 managers from the outside. But that number is a lot easier than trying to go get 5,000 or 4,000 managers from the outside. And this is the problem you can see at scale. Recruiting becomes a massive function, and you put a lot of time and energy into finding talent and bringing them in from the outside. The difference we saw here, and you can see an example on the right of a leader promoted from within, is that you start to get a lot of these benefits here. And the problem that we keep running into is, and what formed this belief that Matt talked about in the beginning, is that you can't out hire a broken leadership pipeline. There is simply not enough great leaders on the market to replace all of the people that are going to leave your brand. But if you can train them from within, you've got the culture embedded in them. You've got the standards embedded in them. And now you can be selective to go hire the great people that are on the market that are looking for a job. But you can't out hire a broken leadership pipeline.
So we're asking the question, why the 80% club? And the answer is A, the math, right? Like Sam just broke it down. But B, or two, also, it's just we've seen the biggest brands in the world are having these conversations. The biggest brands in the world are talking about hitting this metric, specifically brands like what we see here. Shake Shack. Shake Shack releases its results talking about they're in like the 60+% rate of internal promotion. Darden Restaurant Group, which is this family of brands that we all know, is in this like 70+%. Chipotle recently released their new COO talked about it. They're around 90% now using the same system that was implemented like, I don't know, about 10 years ago. And so the biggest brands in the world, the brands that are growing, that are scaling, they are talking about this metric. This is in the conversation. The fourth brand that you see up here, Din Tai Fung, you might not have ever heard of them. You've heard of Shake Shack and Chipotle, but last year they released their results financially, and they're a private company. But it turns out that they have the highest average unit volume of any restaurant chain in the world. So they, per restaurant that they have, they are making $27.4 million, which is twice the second highest in the world, which is Mastro's. So they are killing it from a growth and financial, by all practical metrics. They are the biggest and the best. And they don't always talk about this publicly. I was at their conference last month. They're a client of ours. We made stuff like this. We got to tell their like founder story, and produce a lot of like culture storytelling work with them and a lot of their training. But they were talking about how they are expanding into new markets. Like they went to New York City from California, and they opened up a new location in New York City, and they went in and they hired a bunch of talent in New York City. And they were like, we're going to just find people. We're going to staff this new restaurant here. But what they found is that it just like, it fell apart. It didn't work. And their finding was basically like, hey, when we expand into new markets, they're talking about going to Scottsdale and to Toronto and all these other places. They're saying what they're going to do now is, instead of like going in and like borrowing culture from people that they're hiring, they're going to import their culture from existing restaurants, and they're going to move people, and they're going to grow from within. And they were just very clearly saying, this is our model. We are going to develop from within, and we're going to move people to a new market because we believe this is the best way to grow. We believe this is the way to maintain our business culture and our people culture in an effective way. And so the biggest and the best brands in the world are talking about this. And we believe that if your competitors are promoting faster than you, then they're beating you. We also believe in the human impact of this. And I think that we've all seen this. Anybody who's in the hospitality industry, just you've seen this happen. Like people who have grown up here, people who have started working in a restaurant as like a server or a busser, and then they get promoted and then it becomes like a career. And we have countless stories of lives transformed of people who have grown up in the ranks of a hospitality brand, especially when we were at Chipotle. This was just like constantly part of the conversation was like lives being changed, lives being transformed because they came thinking they were just looking for a job, but they found sort of like a purpose and a mission. Here's just like one very small example, but it stuck out to me because it's someone who I spoke with just like a few weeks ago. It was this woman, Chandra. She works at Mendocino Farms, another partner of ours. And we were interviewing her for their like 20th anniversary celebration video that we're putting out. And I was talking to her, and she literally was saying like, she was saying that growing up through the ranks at Mendo, now she's a director of operations, has changed her life. She was like, it's given me, because I asked her, I was like, how has Mendo impacted your life? She was like, it's done everything for me. It's given me the chance to be a homeowner, to travel the world, and the things that I just didn't think I would ever be able to do. And now it's given her the opportunity to do the same thing for other people. And you see this photo of her from LinkedIn promoting other managers and kind of giving back what she was able to receive. So being a part of the 80% club, we believe that there's just nothing more rewarding than promoting somebody that's earned it.
That's right. And so again, we're rattling off these beliefs because hopefully by this point, you're starting to believe in the idea of promoting from within, starting to see a few reasons why. We'll end it with one more before we start breaking down the actual system. Like, okay, so how do you do it, and how do you have the right infrastructure to support it? But the last thing that I think we feel it in this industry, and if you're on this call, I know a few people that are on the webinar with us right now, I know you feel this, is that feeling when you go into one of your stores and it just doesn't feel right. Like something feels off, and you don't need to know what it is. You just know that like, hey, this is not it. This is not the culture that we believe in. This is not how we want the guest experience or the team experience to be. It just feels off. And so Matt talked about one with Din Tai Fung a little bit earlier. We've seen the same thing. These are our buddies, the Powell brothers out in Wilmington, North Carolina. Similar concept to a lot of ours, where they're at 12 units now. They're growing. And they had a similar world where they were trying to figure out, how do we grow this brand? And when they were in the same city, they kept growing, and they were able to keep the feeling of Drift alive and well when they were in the same city. Last year, for the first time, they went to a new city. They went to Raleigh, North Carolina, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. They started opening in a new market, and they hadn't thought about putting talent, moving talent, or exporting talent to the market. And so they opened up the new market. They had a pretty robust training plan. They hired people from the outside. They trained them. And you can see on the right there is one of the restaurants. That's the one in Chapel Hill. It looks like every other Drift location. It tastes like it. The food is the same food. The coffee is the same coffee. The building is the same building. And yet when they go in there, for the longest time, they were like, it just doesn't feel like Drift, even though the standards are there, even though the SOPs are in place, something just doesn't feel right about it. And the thing at the end of the day that they started realizing was the leaders that were in their brand in Wilmington that grew up with them spent years with them, and they understood how they treated guests and how they treated teams just by osmosis. It didn't have to be a formal training plan. Well, when that's not in the formal training plan, when you hire people from the outside, you start to lose that feeling. It's hard to explain that to somebody verbally, of just how to create the feeling of your culture. And so I think we've all felt this, that at the end of the day, whether, even if you had the math right and you've got the systems in place, sometimes the feeling is just not there. And the way that you get that feeling is through time, and time with people, time spending people, time building culture together and experiencing things. And that's ultimately where it comes from. And so we believe ultimately that you can feel the difference between a culture that's been built versus one that's been borrowed. And I think most of us have felt this, that people that spend time with us on teams, people that spend time with us in restaurants, when you build that culture together, it feels very differently than a team of people that we just hired from the outside that came in and can execute the standards. Because when you do that, you're bringing in the culture that they came from. Whatever leader trained them, whatever team or restaurant they came from, trained them on how to behave. And you now have a borrowed culture. You're borrowing wherever they came from. It's very different when you build it from within and teach people how to act and operate your way with your culture and your standards. So, those are our beliefs. That is what drives us. That's what motivates us as Training Simplified to work with brands to solve these things, because we believe all of these are true. But the ultimate question then becomes, well, how do you solve this and what do you do? But before we jump into it, we kind of want to hear from everybody here a little bit of what is the biggest struggle in your brand? Where are the places that you struggle to grow from within? If you're at the 20% or you're at the 50% now, where are the places that you struggle? So we'll pop it in there for a short answer. We'd love to hear just some ideas of, is it the same things we talked about or is it different?
Awesome. Go ahead. If you see it pop up there, you can type in an answer. Take a second to think about it. All right, we've got a few answers here. Cool.
Let's see. Are you able to see what those are, Matt? I'm not able to read.
I'm not either. Sorry, we've never done a poll before. I was like, oh, I know how to make a poll, but I don't know how to see it. I don't know how to see the
Cool.
answers. Very cool.
Well, thanks for dropping those in. We'll check them out later, I
Yeah, we'll
guess.
check them out and answer.
Fantastic. All right. Well,
All right. Yeah, this is cool.
let's
Thank
talk
you.
about that. Hopefully, these answer some of your questions. If not, drop them in the chat while we're in here. We'll figure it out that way. But Matt, let's talk about the system then. Let's talk about all of these brands have one thing in common, which is they have a system in place in order to do this. You don't just find your way into this or luck your way into it. It's a system in place to create this from within. So let's talk about that.
Awesome. Thank you. I see a couple people dropping in the chat. Ensuring early leaders know how to develop other leaders. Talent not being bought into growth. Work-life balance concerns. I feel like, yeah, it's more like convincing people, like talent not being bought into growth. That's an interesting.
I think
just know how to develop other leaders. Yeah,
it's a huge one. We're going to talk about some of these.
awesome. So we kicked it off by saying, this is aspirational, right? 80% is aspirational. We said why we believe in this, why we know that it's the way to scale restaurants and experience growth. But ultimately, it can't just be an intention. For this to work, for people to actually, for this to be more than aspirational, there has to be a system in place. And so the system that we've developed, that we talk about, we call it the Training Simplified system. And it's really based on these mostly based on these like key touchstones in an employee journey, if you think about it this way. Specifically, that at these different moments and these different touchstones of an employee's life cycle of their experience, you want to have tools and processes in place, and specifically culture building moments at all of these touchstones. So touchstone is a new hire. A touchstone is when someone is becoming a new shift leader. A touchstone is when somebody is getting promoted and put into a place as a new GM. Also, another touchstone is new store openings. You have to have the tools and the systems and the processes and the culture moments in place for all of these. The next one is really, we believe that employee conferences or some sort of re-engagement for like a manager conference is vital to really creating this kind of re-engagement, this culture, and reinforcing the system. Then ultimately, it kind of comes together by having this culture of training and having systems in place to actually make all of this work. So that is simply laid out the Training Simplified system. And this is what we're going to walk through in the back half here.
That's right. So we're going to go into detail here. And in the end, we'll send out a checklist of all this stuff and a link to the deck so you can see it. But the idea here is like when we talk about training, we talk about building and developing people from within. There's a lot of topics to talk about, and we're going to go through a lot of details, but we try to keep things simple here. And these 6 are really the areas that you need to focus on. Because if you don't get these right, the other topics tend to not matter. You got to get these experiences right. And so let's start breaking it down a little bit. Let's start with new hires and talk through, well, what is good training for new hires to set the system up for success? And the first thing that we tend to see is that it actually doesn't start with them after they've been hired. It starts before you hire them. Because if you are trying to promote people from within, you need people that believe what you believe. And so if you have a very specific value set of how you want to show up or how you want people to show up, that all starts with how you recruit them in the first place, whether you're recruiting them as an entry-level person or as a manager to grow them from within. You need to hire people based on values. And so the best brands in the world are using values-based interviewing. And that means that whatever our values are, let's screen for that. Let's have our managers have specific questions and specific answers that they're looking for to make sure that we're hiring people that can't, not just that they can work Thursday nights and they can close on Sundays, but that they believe what we believe. Because the more you do that up front, the easier it is then to promote people that are working and work well for your brand. The second thing that I think everybody on the call should have a new hire orientation of some kind. What we have found is that the best brands in the world focus on these areas within it. So make sure that you've got these things covered, which is you focus on your product. What is it about your product that makes you special? What's the history of your brand? What's the vision of the leaders of the brand? Where are we going? And what's the journey that we're going on together? What are we trying to accomplish here? Then what are the values? So this should reinforce what we hired you for, but what are the values that we are going to hold you accountable to delivering? And then ultimately, what's the career path? And the career path is explaining to this new hire, what's in it for them? Where do they get to go in your brand once they start? And ultimately, if you can do these things well, you answer the question for your new hires, did I make the right decision by joining here? Hopefully, it's more than a job. If you're trying to promote people from within, you want to hire people and give them a new hire orientation that makes them feel like they're a part of something. That increases the likelihood they stay with you and get promoted to the next level. Then once you finish orientation, you move on to comprehensive procedures and SOPs. The word comprehensive is super intentional there. A lot of brands that we start to see, everyone's got recipes or things like that. It is not comprehensive though. And what I mean by that is it's missing a lot of the nuance, where if you read a recipe card or you read a procedure of what to do, and then you watch somebody do it, it's missing so many details on the recipe card or on the procedure card. And so the trick is to make sure that it's got all the nuance and all the side things figured out so that somebody can literally pick it up and read it and do what it says completely. And I guarantee you the right SOP is a lot more detailed than the SOPs that we have out there. And we learned this from our time working with like the Four Seasons, who is like micro specific in their SOPs of what they expect, but anyone can then pick up that SOP and do what it says. You then flow into hospitality standards. We are all in the hospitality industry. This is different than the food that you make or the things that you create or your cleaning procedures. This is how you treat guests. And the best brands in the world have standards for how they treat guests. We simplify it down into food, feel, flow. But you should have your own standards of some kind. But what we believe and what we've seen is that the food has to be safe and delicious. We're all in the restaurant world, so it's got to be safe and delicious. The feeling of the restaurant has to be one that guests want to keep coming back to again and again. And it's got to flow appropriately. That means it goes slow when it's got to go slow. But when we got to go fast, we can crank and we can go fast. And you've got to adjust the tempo to the speed of service that you're looking for. If you do those three things well, you've got your hospitality standards laid out. And then the last one, and you'll see this theme through everything else that we're about to talk to, is a training plan. So we just talked through a lot of stuff. You've got an orientation. You have super comprehensive SOPs. You've got hospitality standards. The question then is, what's your plan to teach all of those things and validate that the person learning them has actually learned all of them? And in the case of new hires, it's usually a shift by shift plan. Could be 3 shifts, could be 5 shifts, but over the course of some number of shifts, have you learned and been able to perform everything you need to do to be successful in this role? If you haven't, you're skipping things, and that's going to lead to poor standards for the brand, missing culture, poor guest experience if we're missing any of these things. So we don't want any of those things to be true. And so the plan and adhering to the plan is the last thing that you've got this well-rounded experience. So when we talk about new hires, you're hiring the right people, giving them a great orientation, comprehensive SOPs, clear hospitality standards, and a shift by shift plan to wrap all of this together and make sure that we're conveying all that information to people.
So after new hires, next sort of like touchstone in the system is new shift leaders. This is just the point where somebody goes from like being the level of like just owning a station to being promoted. It's kind of like the first step in like moving towards a manager role, right? If someone suddenly becomes a shift leader. And this is where they go from owning a station to owning a shift and leading people. And so some of the systems to have in place, compliance and certifications, we're all familiar with that. You have to have a system of that for people to get trained, taught, and actually pass the right certifications. A daily shift safety log. This is kind of table stakes. Like you have to have a system in place, a tool in order to track safety on that shift, both for food and for people and for the environment. And then what we've seen that works really well is for every shift, having some sort of communication system that this shift leader can utilize and rely on so that it's not just like, hey, talk to everybody, but have a system for this shift leader that they can use. And so what we've seen, this is what the visual there is like a poster, like a communications board, for lack of a better word. And a lot of brands have these, but specifically a tool that will communicate daily goals, roles, so like deployment of the shift, just kind of like some of the basic stuff, and also any communication that needs to happen during that shift. So giving the shift leader a tool and letting them own that tool, but also emergency response for that shift leader, making sure that they know how to respond in any emergency. They might be the only person in the building, and if there's a fire, if there's something terrible that happens, they need to know how to respond. So these are the things that every shift leader needs, and they learn these things specifically. Instead of a shift by shift plan for a manager in training, they have a week by week training plan, right? Because it's bigger. There's a longer runway for learning. And so they learn all of these things and all of these systems and all of these tools through the week by week training plan that's specifically created for a shift leader.
That's right. And it's an important distinction here to separate shift leaders from this next group. And where we see some brands go wrong is they merge these together. But GMs are a very different group than your shift leaders. And so separating them becomes super important here because your shift leaders, like we said, they're usually just coming from hourly. They're leading a shift for the very first time. It's a whole new responsibility. That's a lot on its own. And so you shouldn't underestimate the weight of becoming a new shift leader. Now you layer on a GM. And now we're talking about the entire business. And so the first thing when you think about new GMs that are joining your brand is a comprehensive education on the business and the leadership side of things. And so that's their role. That's knowing sales, knowing COGS, knowing labor, and knowing other expenses. Really, everything at a restaurant can be broken down into one of those buckets. But your GMs need exposure to every one of those elements because at every brand we talk to, your general manager is in charge of every one of those things. And so we've got to make sure that we're providing them the education around how we operate every one of those things. The second thing that some great brands do is we call it zone by zone walkthrough, but their GMs are very intentional about how they walk the store every day and the path that they walk through in the store. And every day that GM is in the store, they're walking the same path to see equipment, to see it from the guest point of view, to see the building, any maintenance, any repair that needs to go on as they walk through it. And it's a very intentional path so that nothing goes through the cracks. And so they teach their managers when you walk in, this is the exact path that you walk. There's a checklist of things to look at as you go through to make sure we're not missing any standards. And their GMs, when they own the building, have a specific path that they walk when they own the building. Then it gets into the business review. Your GMs own the business. Some of the best brands that we've seen do a monthly business review. So after the P&L closes, you get area managers with their GMs coming together to look at monthly reviews, or at the very least, a quarterly business review. Let's look at Q1 results. Let's bring everybody together and let's look at our financials. But you do it together where you're looking at trends and you're diagnosing what's working, what's not working, and brainstorming what to do on your own. Everybody should be looking at the financials and the P&L every day and periodically. This is a chance, though, to come back and really audit the business and come up with a plan for how to improve the business on some cadence. And then just like the last ones, we said this was going to be redundant, but this is where the best brands stay consistent. There's a separate plan for GMs that's separate from the shift leader plan. And again, this is a multi-week plan because in this case, the GM is usually writing schedules. There's only one schedule a week. They're managing the P&L. P&Ls are usually calculated monthly. And so if you want to know if somebody can improve the P&L, it's going to take a couple months to do that. You can teach them everything in the P&L in a day, but seeing if they can manage it and improve it takes a couple months. And so the best brands in the world aren't training somebody and saying we're done in a couple weeks. They know it's a couple months because we're following up on the P&L and following up on the things that this leader is actually accountable for. Then we move into new store openings. And from this kind of encapsulates everything we've just talked about. It's all of those things wrapped into one. But the best brands in the world here are looking at new store openings months in advance, up to 6 months in advance. They know when an opening is going to happen because that's when they can start identifying the leadership team. And when we talk about promoting from within, this advanced warning is what starts to make all of the difference. Because if I can see 6 months in advance, I'm going to have an opening for sure. We know turnover is going to happen. Construction is on time. I can now start to say, well, what's my bench? Who can I pull from and where can I go? If I only have 4 weeks to find somebody, that creates a lot of friction in the system to find a new manager internally or go emergency hire somebody from the outside. So being able to get as far in front of this as possible and be thinking about not just when do we break ground, when are permits happening, but when is the restaurant going to open and when do I need the leadership team in place months in advance. The more you do that, the more you can prepare and the more you can get closer to that 80% rate of internal promotion. Then from there, it's a comprehensive guide that includes how do we recruit 30-ish people to run this store? How do we manage turnover from the construction teams to the new store to how do we train and open this store effectively? It is a comprehensive manual that covers all 3 of those things that teams can walk out the building with, and you can have an NRO manager or a new store opening manager out there with the GM effectively opening all of these things. And then once a store opens, post-opening business reviews are huge for brands. For those that have opened restaurants, you know that there's a curve. We start out with really high sales, and then it tends to dip at some point. And in that dip is when we figure out, well, what's the actual business we're running here? What are the actual sales? What's the actual food cost? And really specifically, what's the actual labor adjustment that we need to make? Because usually you need to cut labor to be in line with sales. To do that, you've got to track your data pretty regularly. The brands that do this well can get their new store opening numbers dialed in 90 days. 90 days after opening, we're settled in and we've got the right labor and COGS numbers. The brands that struggle with this, it's up to a year after opening, we're still figuring out labor and food cost and things like that. The post-opening business review, make sure that we're on top of it, we're reviewing things, we're coming up with a plan, and we're shortening the time to profitability for our new store openings. And you do that with a business review similar to what they do with general managers. So that is the opening, that's the operation side of things, but it's not all new stuff, right, Matt? It's more than just the new hires or the new stores or the new managers. You got to re-engage folks too.
Yeah, and so that's why I said it up at the top that there's this opportunity to re-engage managers, keep them motivated, and really this culture building moment that we see with employee conferences. And again, the brands that we've highlighted here, that we've partnered with, that we've been a part of, they do this on a regular basis. They make this a priority. And it doesn't have to be this huge blown out thing for if you have like 3 units, if you have 5 units, it could be a 1-day offsite, or it could be a full blown conference like what some of these partners have done. But what we've seen for as far as manager conferences, sort of like the checklist of things that make a manager conference really, really effective from our experience is leaders inspiring the team with a vision. getting the leaders on stage and having them say something inspirational, really inspiring with the vision of where we're going. Also, public recognition of employees. This is just like this is a part of every brand that does this well, right? They're doing focused recognition in order to build culture. Also, stories that bring the message to life. Focused storytelling also builds culture. And we see the best way to do this at a conference is really with like engaging media, but it doesn't always have to be media or content. It's just stories that reinforce culture. And lastly, we see that conferences that do this really well, they provide education that lives on long after the conference. So there's like longevity to it, right? So that means that if you're doing like a workshop or having some sort of like learning lab, that's not just something that happens once at the conference. It's something that becomes ingrained in like a training system that lives on, so that managers who get promoted or hired in a month or 3 months or 6 months get the same information that was introduced at the conference. So it's an opportunity to introduce something new that becomes ingrained into a training system that lives on. So this is what we see that works really well for manager conferences that the brands that are a part of this 80% club are doing on a regular basis.
That's right. And then it ends with a world where a lot of you dropped comments in and talked about this, but the last thing is the culture of training. So it's one thing to have all of these tools in place. And as we rattle this through, hopefully you're nodding your heads like, yep, I got one of those. Yep, we're good there. There might be a couple things where you're like, yeah, we need that. That would be cool. This is the thing that ultimately determines whether the training works or doesn't work, which is the culture that surrounds it. And the first thing that we see that the best brands do really well is the leaders in the stores are accountable for development. It's part of their bonus systems. It's part of their metrics. It's the conversation that's happening during market visits. It's more about people development than it is around operations or anything like that. It is a part of the system because if leaders aren't accountable for developing people, these are just tools and things rolling around inside stores. They collect dust and they're not leveraged very well. It takes a level of accountability, and that starts at the top, whether that's your COO cascading that vision down or your CEO cascading that vision down. There's a mandate from the top that it is every leader's job to develop people from within. And without that, it's hard to grasp onto everything else that we're talking to. The second then is that leaders teach to the system. So we showed all these books as we go through there. The books kind of summarize all of the standards and all of the practices. The best brands in the world, if something goes wrong across units, they update the system. They don't point fingers at people. Leaders don't come in teaching their own standards or their own way. They update the system. Because if we're all using the system and if we're all leveraging the system to grow and develop talent, when the system is wrong, we need to tweak it. And so rather than going around it or teaching their own things, we're constantly reinforcing, rebuilding, reusing the system. And the leaders are bought into, we're going to teach to the system. And the system will be what we rely on to create the results. And if we're not getting the results, we focus on the system. Either we hired the wrong people, we didn't train them effectively, or we're not holding people accountable to doing what the system said. But we're focused on the system, not on things outside of the system. The third then is that promotions are tracked. And so it's one thing to hold people accountable. It's one to have a system, but a public display. That's why we focus on RIP, that rate of internal promotion. That's a metric that should be public and displayed and visible for people to see, because if it's not, then it's just another thing that happens off to the side. And then the last one that you see there is celebrating these promotions. When it happens, the best brands in the world are celebrating the people that get promoted, because this is the culture. This is the culture that brings it all to life. So without this, you've got a bunch of tools and a bunch of stuff floating around. But this is the comprehensive system. It is all of training boiled down into 6 key moments to focus on that if you get these right, generally you're going to be in good shape and you can start focusing on everything else. But you've got to get your new hires right. You've got to get that first promotion to shift leadership right. You've got to get the new GMs right, new stores right, and then constantly re-engage people through conferences or offsites, and then make sure that you've got a culture of training that supports all of these systems in place. And if you can do that, that is ultimately what leads to the rate of internal promotion at 80%. And if you're struggling with it or you're not at 80% yet, something in this system is broken, and something in this system is the thing that you need to figure out and improve.
So we share this today because ultimately, like we started out saying, we believe that this is the way for a brand to grow and to scale, is to really aspire to be in the 80% club. And we've seen the best brands in the world as part of this conversation and really aspiring to this. But I know a lot of the people on the call today are really in the training and learning and development world, but we're really taking this message and we want to give it to founders, to people who are looking to grow and scale their brands that might not know about a system like this. I feel like for a lot of the people listening, you're like, yeah, this is our world. But for some people who this is not their world, like it's just like an eye-opening moment to be able to like kind of see that there's a whole system in place that they might be lacking that can lead to this like this 80% goal of developing leaders from within. And I like to look back and think about, I mean, imagine speaking of founders, like Sam and I talk about Chipotle all the time because that's where we were. We spent a lot of time there. But Steve Ells was the founder of Chipotle over 25 years ago. And over the last 25 years, Chipotle has employed about 1 million people over a 25-year history. There's been about 1 million employees at Chipotle. Now, I can't imagine that when he started it in Denver 25 years ago, he would ever dream that there would be 1 million people that he would be employing over the next 25 to 30 years. But I say that number to point out that like there's so much responsibility in this world. Like we have this like weight of responsibility to really empower the people that work for us, the people that are part of our brands, the people that are coming through our doors as team members, as managers, as leaders. Like imagine the impact that you can have on 1 million lives if you have systems in place that's meant to develop people, that's meant to promote people, that's meant to build people. That's a large responsibility. And it has so much potential for a huge impact on a lot of lives. If there's a bunch of people who are in small brands that aspire to be big brands, it's I encourage people to not just think about growth and development and more units, but think about all of the lives that could be impacted by employing more people and having systems in place that will really pour into them, that will give them the best that you have so that they can be the best that they can be and they can grow into something that maybe they never really imagined. And ultimately, that's what we think it's all about in being a part of the 80% club and having this mindset of developing leaders from within. We believe that it's the best way to scale, but it's also just the best way to like operate as a brand.
Exactly right. So for those on the call, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for staying. We're going to be sending out a full checklist of all these things so you can look at it and say like, okay, what do I have? What don't I have? We'll send out a link to this deck as well, just so you've got examples. But we're here for you if you want examples of what brands are doing, if you want to see some of the stuff that we do, we're here to talk about it and give you some ideas, but ultimately help you cross that chasm to get to that world where you're developing leaders from within and it's easy and it feels not monumental. It feels like something that's super achievable to do because it is. It's just a matter of building the system and building the culture that supports the system.
Thanks everybody for tuning in today. Thanks to the people on YouTube. I see you. So long. Have a great Friday. Thanks, Philip. See you
Thanks,
guys.
guys. Bye, everybody.